Hey, what's going on, AP government fans? We have video number 2 for you in our continuing series. This one is on separation of powers, a very important topic. So let's get going. All right, so a brief intro. What the heck is separation of powers? Well, it is simply dividing or separating government powers among different branches of government. We typically associate 3 different branches of government. So what's the purpose of this? Well, it's to prevent one person or a branch from gaining too much power. You want to know a fancy word for like taking over or gaining power? It's called usurping. You Game of Thrones fans know this word. Robert Baratheon was called the Great Usurper because he became king after defeating the vicious Targaryen. So anyway, usurping is to kind of gain control or take power away from somebody else or something else or a group of people. So the purpose of this is to avoid that. So Baron de Montesquieu, this French Enlightenment thinker, here is good old Baron. He really is credited with this idea, although it had been around for a very long time. His writing, The Spirit of Laws in 1748, really kind of reintroduced world society to separation of powers. And he advocated for 3 branches of government. So how is this seen in the United States government? Well, today, under the Constitution, we have 3 branches. We have the legislative branch, which is Congress, and we have the executive branch, which is really seen through the president and the vice president. And we also have the judicial branch, which establishes court systems, most notably the Supreme Court. All right, so let's take a look at Article 1 of the Constitution. This is what establishes the legislative branch through Congress. So if you're like me and you have on your iPhone a Constitution app, you go to Article 1 and the legislative branch is listed first. This is very important because the framers of the Constitution really viewed the legislative branch the most important branch of government. And here's my favorite legislator ever, my boy Henry Clay, Speaker of the House and longtime senator as well. So definitely need to know this. What are some powers specifically given to Congress? Well, they can declare war. They can also collect taxes and tariffs. They can regulate trade, both inter and foreign. And U.S. history people will remember interstate trade means trade between 2 or more states. Intra, I-N-T-R-A, is trade within a state. So that's controlled by a state itself, whereas inter is controlled by the federal government. Congress can also coin money, establish post offices, create courts, and establish the numbers of justices on the Supreme Court, which has changed over time. And here's an example of regulating trade, the very famous Failed Embargo Act of 1807. And for those of you wondering, embargo spelled backwards is oh grab me. All right, so the House, now let's break it down within Congress. The House, which is one part of it, they can vote to impeach officials. It does not mean you're removing them from office. That can be a result, but impeachment simply means to bring charges against. And they, members of the House, also start all revenue bills. We'll talk about that more in a future video. Now, the Senate, they are the jurors in an impeachment trial, and they're the ones that are responsible for ratifying treaties and presidential appointments. Very special, important powers given to the Senate. Members of Congress, according to the Constitution, cannot serve in Congress and simultaneously hold a position in the executive branch. So if you're a senator and you're appointed to the president's cabinet, for example, you have to resign as senator. Jumping over to Article 2, this establishes the executive branch through the president, vice president, and others. There's no mention of the cabinet in the Constitution, although that has been around since George Washington's presidency. So some specific powers given to the executive branch. He or she is the commander-in-chief. They cannot declare war of the executive branch. That is an example of something that Congress can do, and that's checks and balances. We'll talk about checks and balances a lot more in the next video. But we see here Washington, this is when he led the military to crush the Whiskey Rebellion in the 1790s. So the president is commander-in-chief, but cannot declare war. They also, the main responsibility of the executive branch is to enforce laws. The president can also make treaties and appoint officials, whether it's to the cabinet or Supreme Court, for example, but those are subject to the Senate approval. And we see here Woodrow Wilson, who played an instrumental role in the Treaty of Versailles, which ended World War I, and he really hoped that the United States would join the League of Nations, but as we know, the Senate rejected it. So that's another example of checks and balances, which we'll talk about in the next video. And the president can also call special sessions for Congress if he or she feels it's necessary. And what most people associate the executive branch with is enforcing law. So definitely know those as well. Let's jump over to Article 3. This establishes the judicial branch through the Supreme Court and lower courts. So some powers specifically given to the judicial branch. Well, number one, they hear cases. They are ones that will hear cases and decide outcomes. Judicial review is something that we associate with the Supreme Court, and that's the ability to declare a law unconstitutional, but it is not mentioned in the Constitution. That comes about as a result of the 1803 Supreme Court case, Marbury versus Madison, in which this dude, John Marshall, ruled an act unconstitutional. I have a video in the description that explains that very well. And judges hold their positions for life. This is very important. Think about this for a second. Why do you think Supreme Court justices are essentially appointed for life? It's either till they die, they resign, or they're removed from impeachment, which never happened. So why is this important? Well, they want to avoid the judges being influenced by politics. They can make unpopular decisions that they feel follow the Constitution without fear of reprisal. So the framers really wanted the judges to not be associated with politics. All right, let's do a quick recap. 1, Montesquieu's spirit of laws. Definitely know what it's about. 2, how separation of powers is seen in the U.S. government. Specific powers given to the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. That's what we covered in this video. Test tips for this video for multiple choice. Definitely know Montesquieu's influence. Reasons for and the purpose of separation of powers. And if you could throw the word usurper in in a free response essay, that'd be fantastic. And be able to identify specific powers of each branch for a free response. Definitely you could see this tied in, separation of powers tied in as an example of limited government. All right, guys, look forward to seeing you right back here for video number 3, an extension of this video, basically. It is all about checks and balances. And we'll take a look at this dude, James Madison, the shortest president ever in U.S. history. I thank you guys very much for watching, and have a good day.